Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to puff him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
What's going on, everybody? John Zannis, Bobby Manning here, pulling ourselves together and trying to make sense of this late breaking news involving the Boston Celtics. The Celtics are sold. Surprising timing on the announcement, especially considering recent reports were saying it wasn't imminent. They were still kind of in the review process. Also surprising in who bought the team, and the front runner appeared to be Pags for a long time, and that's where a lot of people thought this would go. And instead of selling to a local private equity guy who already was involved with the team, they sold to a local private equity guy who's not involved with the team in Bill Chisholm. $6.1 billion, and this number could grow as time goes on because this is majority stake and there could be more stuff to come. But the deal is done. Kind of everybody's jumping in, trying to figure out how they feel about it. And we're trying to make sense of it too and understand why this happened or how it ended up in these hands. And in many cases, it's simply as these guys paid 1 penny more than the next closest guys, and they got it. So Bobby, again, there's a lot of stuff out there and a lot of people are speculating based on what we know so far. And what we know, private equity type of guy, people have their own feelings about that. I have mine. Local guy, I think people tend to like that. And not Uber, Bezos, Steve Ballmer sort of rich sort of person is also something that has to factor in to how you feel overall. Honestly, none of it matters, Bobby, until you see what they do, particularly with what is coming for this team, which is an enormous record-setting bloated payroll and tax bill that's coming next year, and everybody sees that train coming down the tracks, and no one knows how this new ownership group is going to respond to something like this. So really, it's all going to come down to actions rather than speculation. And so that's kind of where we're at with here. This is the snapshot view. We'll wait for more people to fiddle in. I want to hear everybody in the chat. I want to hear what you think about all of this stuff, because we want to, you might have good information, good insight, good opinions. We just want to kind of take the temperature and the vibe before Bobby chimes in here. Just let you know quickly that this show is powered, as always, by Prize Picks. And again, great time to get involved here with all of the college hoops going on this weekend. Sign up today. Use that promo code CLNS for America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Play 5, get 50 instantly in account where you sign up. Run your game with Prize Picks today. All right, Bobby, let's get into it. What are your initial thoughts here as you've kind of spent some time digging into this Celtics sale?
Yeah, I think it creates some future uncertainty here over the direction of the team. This new owner, who we don't know a ton about here, other than the private equity angle, like you said, John, they're really playing up his Celtics fandom in a lot of the reporting and the statement here, as well as the inclusion of one of the other Celtics owners, I guess Robert Hale, in this thing. So they're trying to really stress the continuity, that Wyc's going to remain involved here for 3 years, which he told us a couple of weeks ago there was still the plan. And obviously he's been hyping up throughout this process. That always seems to be, going back to Mark Cuban and the Mavericks sale, the intention of the outgoing owner. But does it actually play out? Does it actually prove significant? Usually not, as we just saw with the Luka trade, which I think we all agree Cuban would have never done out there in Dallas. So they're going in a new direction here. And I think if you've liked the 22-year rule of this ownership group over the franchise and the investments they've made and the way they've prioritized winning, I do think it creates some uncertainty, because we don't know what this guy's priorities are. We don't know what his funding is. It seems like it's significant if you're going to pay $6-7 billion here, as it appears, along with some other groups and people who are involved in this thing. So you would think if they would want to, that they'd be able to keep this massive spending spree going in the short term here. But we don't know if that's their priority. They're going to have say in this stuff. I don't think it's going to be as simple as Wyc just saying, yeah, we're keeping this together for a couple of years here. And as we were kind of kicking back and forth in the chat earlier, John, here, it's actually interesting that Wyc would tie himself to a potential deconstruction of this team as soon as this summer. Like, they're going to have some difficult choices to make money-wise almost immediately. Now, Brad has said, the times we've talked to him, they're going business as usual. They haven't received any prerogatives to downscale their spending. In fact, last summer they sent the spending through the roof. But as we always talked about, John, that was with approval of an ownership group that wasn't going to have to pay those salaries. So now that the new boss is here, that the new owner's here, he's going to decide, and I'd say decide almost unilaterally, are we going to spend $500 million next year? And if his decision is no, they're going to have to make a difficult decision of some sort.
Again, and then that's what it comes down to. The problem here is it's borderline can't win, because I don't think anybody, Bobby, was going to spend that money. That's the thing. I don't think current ownership would have spent that money. I think current ownership would have had we have to kind of look at the present and the future and made some hard choices, and fans would not have loved that either. As for Wyc staying on board, I don't fully understand the obsession with that, because, as you said, if
You
you're
never
going
want to give it up, John.
no doubt about it. And it's like, your parents sold the house with the pool, and you like negotiated with the new buyers, like, hey, can my kid come and jump in the pool every once in a while? Like, we're right next door. He just wants to maybe use the basketball hoop from time to time. Is that cool? And they're like, I guess, like, there's no way a new ownership group comes in and gives Wyc any actual say or power. Certainly all decisions. He'll be a figurehead here. So I don't understand what he gains by staying. Maybe there's some stuff behind the scenes, and this is what's going to be interesting, what we learn after the fact. This could be as simple as Wyc, they have, their shareholders, and they have a duty to get as much as possible. You can always look at deals and decide what was the best structured versus what's the highest number, how much of it is financed, how much of it is hard cash. And we're going to get into what Pags said and what Pags' offer was. And Wyc, is it possible that part of the thing involved Wic's staying on board and being part of it, or having a leadership role? Is it possible Wyc didn't want to answer to Pags because Pags was kind of underneath him all of this time? I don't really know all of this stuff. It is curious why Pags was frozen out, if it was close or close enough, or given an opportunity to do everything possible to come up and over whatever the final bid was. Again, let's see what happens there. It literally might have been as easy as this was just the highest bid by a considerable margin. They took it.
Yeah, and I think when you go back to the original statement on the sale, that it's for the family planning purposes, and of turning 90 here, and obviously trying to get, I'm just sure, his money in order to, multiple kids, or whatever that process might be there. I do think there is a need to take the highest possible bid there. And this process did drag out a bit, John. I was always curious what was holding it up. I think the initial plan was to sell a majority share by the end of 2024. We're now almost into late March here. This ends up getting done. So something, whether it was haggling over the price, which I don't think turned out to be the case because they got the money they wanted here, or Wyc wanting to stay on board and trying to find someone who would put up with that, or agree to that. It's so funny in the statement too that he's like, Bill asked me to stay on for 3 years, and I'm very happy to do so. Like, it's funny stuff, but I am just interested to see what the impact's going to be on the front office, and that's the only thing that really matters here, is what the impact's going to be on the team tangibly. I don't think it really matters who this guy is, or whether he's a Celtics fan, or whether he's from Georgetown, or any of the things down the line, private equity and all the rest. If he's willing to invest in the team and mostly keep it together into the future here, I think people will be thrilled with that.
Yes, no doubt. And again, that's what it comes down to. Everything at this point is going to be speculation, but let's go over exactly what it is that we do know. And you're right. It's whether they want to win or not. I would imagine, and I'm going to put up Wyc Grousbeck's statement here to start. Bill is a terrific person, a true Celtics fan. Bobby, you want to read that? It blurred for me on my screen. I don't know if my Wi-Fi is having an issue.
I think I need my glasses. And born and raised in the Boston area. Yeah, Georgetown.
His love for the team and the city of Boston, along with the chemistry, the rest of the Celtics leadership, made him a natural choice to be the next governor and controlling owner of the team. I know he appreciates the importance of the Celtics and burns with a passion to win on the court, while he's really committed to the community. Quite simply, he wants to be a great owner. He has asked me, as you pointed out, to return to the team as CEO and governor for the first 3 years and stay on as his partner, and I'm glad to do so. And again, you do wonder how much of this had to do with, like, I want to sell it to one of my buddies who's going to let me continue to pretend that I'm in charge. Again, I don't know if
you think that's
case.
actually going to happen, John?
Again, I don't know, because you put it this way. There's two things to look at it, correct? You can look at it as, yeah, you'll stay on and you could be the face of the franchise and the face of the teardown, so I don't take all of the heat and ease my suffering here. Two, you know, you might let Wyc preside over another championship, or who knows, as they kind of ride out this ride here. Three, it's new. And look, I mean, any company buys another company. Oftentimes you're keeping some people around who know a thing or two about how to run the business. So,
and that does seem to be the case here.
They come in and they buy, you buy somebody and you pay, you pay them out and you pay them a salary to stay on, and you know, their full shares vest after 5 years. It's not crazy, but it is, you know, something you see, but you don't see it often with sports ownership. Usually people come in and they just have their own people and their own team, and it's a clean sweep and they do whatever. As far as Chisholm goes, here he is, growing up in the North Shore and attending college in New England. I have been a diehard Celtics fan my entire life, though he lives in California right now. He is reportedly going to be moving back here and buying a house, which is good, because you're not going to have a Jeremy Jacobs sort of situation here with an absentee owner. I understand how important the Celtics are to the city of Boston. The role the team plays in the community is different than any other city in the country. I also understand that there is a responsibility as a leader of the organization to the people of Boston, and I am up for this challenge. My partners and I have immense respect for Wyc, the entire Grousbeck family, and all of blah, blah, blah. We're looking to do good things. Look, a boilerplate stuff, and this is what you would expect. Nobody's going to issue statements saying, my first order of business is to slash $200 million from the payroll. So everything is going to be all nice and fun and puppy dogs and sunshine and rah-rah, and we're going to do it. But really, it's just going to be the actions. It's really going to be hard to have an opinion here until you see what they do. And so that's where we get into the private equity stuff. Like, these guys, for a living, are about profit. That's what they do. They buy for $1, sell for $2, or they buy something that's failing and they, you know, restructure it and make it a profitable business. So we're not going to call the Celtics a failing business, but certainly if you're going to spend $500 million and make $500 million, that's not good business. So they're going to try to figure out a way to make money off of this thing as well. And that's what private equity guys do. What you're hoping is this is what I've always said about owners. I don't give a crap who owns what, as long as their primary focus is not to make money, but to treat it as a passion project. It's I make money doing this stuff over here in my private equity firm or Bain Capital or wherever this is where I make money, and this is my toy. This is the thing that I want that's totally impractical, and I'm going to burn cash doing it, but it's my passion project, and I want to be owner of this team that I grew up rooting for. You have it a little bit with Kraft, even though, again, the spending there hasn't been what people want, but it is a local owner. You certainly have it, with the last ownership group, and here with Chisholm. And it's better to be from here than not, because you do feel a little bit beholden to the fan base. So again, I'm hoping it's the latter. I'm hoping it's the passion project as opposed to the former, which is I'm in it to make money. And when you're paying this kind of dough, Bobby, $6 billion, and you don't own the arena, you're a little closed off in terms of, how lucrative you can make something like this now. Because it's like, I'm not saying you're maxed out in franchise values, because each one seems to be more expensive than the last, but like, you're looking at, a 2,000% return off of what people are buying stuff if you bought it 20 years ago. Like, I can't imagine if you sell the Celtics in 10 years, 15 years, it's worth $600 billion. Like, I don't know how much farther you can take these things. It's
Yeah,
going to
right.
go up,
And
but I don't know where you go in terms of the valuations. How much higher?
yeah, and it's probably not the profit purchase that Wyc and Company made back then too, with the 300 million. Then it turns into 6 billion. That's probably just not what it's going to be, given these prices and where these sports are going and TV dynamics and all of that. So I'd have to imagine anyone who's getting in at this price isn't thinking that they're going to make a massive profit in the near term, at the very least. I think what it comes down to, and the optimistic view you can take of this, is that, as you said earlier, John, Wyc and Company, that ownership group wasn't going to be able to pay 500 million next year and whatever cost it will be into the future to keep this team together. That just wasn't happening. Can Wyc be the face of this group if he is tying himself to this and trying to become the face of this new ownership group here, while that group actually funds this thing? That's, I think, the best case scenario if you're a fan, is that there's actually going to be some real funding coming in here and they get to make the money and do all the things behind the scenes, and we'll see what happens with the arena. I know someone put out there again today that they are at TD Garden through 2036. So that's going to be a very long-term process, that move, which I think is almost inevitable here. Stuff like that coming with this ownership group. So that's one piece of it. But then it's the piece of this summer. Do you now have the ability to run back this team one more time? I think, going back to what I've heard for a long time, John, is that when they made these deals and they signed all these extensions and such, it was the thought of, let's just get this stuff done now. Let's keep these guys in the mix. Let's do all this stuff before the new restrictions come into place here. And then basically, as that money and tax hits start happening here, we can decide year to year. All right, we won the championship last year. Let's run it back again with that group one more time. Oh, we lost in the East Finals. We're about to be the most expensive team in the NBA. We probably have to shake some stuff up here. I think it's going to be as simple as that for this front office, at the very least, unless there's some major directive by ownership here to downsize going into the summer. But again, just from like a practical standpoint, John, I know they're probably looking for the most money here, and that's the only consideration. But I'd also have to imagine there is some level of vetting of, yeah, you guys aren't just going to tear this whole team down, after you buy it, right? Like, that's not the plan here. You're not just going to completely slash payroll to try to make some money here. I'm sure that's part of the process, at the very least, and these conversations that they've had, is that there isn't an immediate plan to slash salaries significantly. And, I think when it comes to Brad, John, and we've talked about this forever, I think Brad's intention is to build around Tatum and Brown, figure out everything else around those two, just have that as the staple of how you're going to compete into the future. Those guys still being relatively young, those guys being two stars that can carry a team regardless of the talent around them to relative competitiveness. So I think what we're looking at here, whether it's this summer, John, or into the near future, maybe the summer after that, is a reshaping of the franchise around these guys. Kind of like the Patriots with Brady. They had that first run, then they have to bring in draft picks and reorganize and create that like second core. And then maybe you have a second run with Brown and Tatum after that. So how soon is that going to happen? To me, I still think you're probably going to lose one piece this summer. I think that's probably likely, unless you win a championship and you want to do one last hurrah.
I think it's a certainty. And I do think that people aren't going to love what happens. So the key is you have to, there's a million. This is independent of Chisholm.
The other factor
whomever.
too, John, I forgot to mention it, is you can finance the salary for next year. Like, you can get some debt and pay the 500 million next year by financing it. And that might be how you get one more year out of this if you're them. So it's not like you just have to pull 500 million out of your pocket and pay that next year.
No, you don't. But everything is complicated. Someone put up here, for example, Horford is a free agent. I saw the number. I think it's every.
I
3
started
million
digging around
Horford.
about this a little bit because I think it's a good question.
Every 3 million you pay Horford is 25 million in actual money. It's that bad. So again, I just, people have to be prepared for exactly these rules are built to stop this from the Celtics from existing, and they are extremely punitive. It is It is not some teams will just suck it up and do it. It's basically a hard stop. It's a red light, going off a cliff. They're trying to murder you. No one is going to do this and pay this. That's the point. It's not the type of thing where people just kind of flout it and be like, whatever, I'm paying $2 for every dollar. Puh. They don't mind that. They are killing you here, trying to kill you with this. So yes, there's real decisions coming. There's no question about that. It really comes down to what they do. And again, I say this independent of this particular ownership group. I have always thought that there's probably 2 and 3 different things that Brad is going to have to explore, and you're going to have to weigh them, right? It's not going to be, I cannot believe he's going to say, Bobby, I'm keeping Tatum and Brown at all costs and shutting my, earmuffs if anybody asks for one of those guys. I think everything is on the table, which is, what's the Jalen package going to get me, and what's my team look like after? What's the no Horford and Drew Holiday package going to get me, and what can I do there? All of those things are going to be considered, and whichever team in return is better, that's the move you make. I don't believe you're married to what you have. I believe you're married to what it's going to look like after you move things around to take care of this cap situation, this cap jail that you're in. That's how this is going to play, more likely than not. Not I'm holding on to these guys at all costs. You've got Tatum as untouchable, White at a bit of a bargain. KP, you're happy with what you're paying him right now, but obviously a salary like that could potentially move, and that's it. That's what you're safe with. I think everything else is legitimately on the table.
Yep, and KP 1 more year at 30 million-ish. Drew started the 4-year extension this year, so he's signed for a significant amount of time here. I think he might even have a player option at the end of that deal. Yeah, so just a massive salary, and we talked about that at the time, John. You want to keep Drew. You want him part of this run back this year and the next couple, if you can. But the fact that you had to sign him for over $100 million there over 4 years at this point in his career was a difficult decision to make, and ends up being already a factor as part of their run this year. He's been hurt and need to rest nights and hasn't been as effective this year. So you're definitely looking at that contract and wondering what that's going to become. A lot of these teams in this new era, John, you saw it with the Clippers and Paul George. The straightest path to downsizing money has just been let a guy walk after his contract expires. So that might end up being the case with Porzingis after next year in terms of this process. And then with Brown, and I'm still adamant about it, John. I don't think Stevens has any intention of moving Brown here. But you look at what happened with Towns in Minnesota, move him, bring back Randall, try to have this guy who's 80% of Towns and some other pieces there. And it's been a mixed bag with that approach for them so far. You look at what happened with Luka this year, a very unique situation in itself too, but another move largely motivated by the Supermax he was going to be signing this summer. It hasn't worked out great for the teams that have done that thing yet. Bring back a comparable star or maybe an older guy who's making a little bit less for less money here. My mind does go to Durant again, John. But, 2 years removed from that debate we had, how's it looking for him? Where's he at in his career? How much does he have left to offer at this point? I don't think that's as appealing as it was a couple years ago. So to me, again, I think you reorganize around Brown and Tatum, maybe take a step back here 2 years from now, try to get as much out of next year as you can. And then at that point, try to build something new around those guys with the flexibility you would have at that point. But even something as simple as having Brown and Tatum on Supermax deals is extremely prohibitive in this new CBA, because that's what 50% of your cap, just 2 guys. So
I like I said,
challenging.
Everyone's going to assume I'm looking at this from my perspective of, I've always thought Jalen might be a little bit more, I don't think I've never thought Brown is as good as some of Celtics Nation thinks that he is. I've always thought he's good. I've never thought he's max player good. I've always thought that that's going to be a challenge for the Celtics to have both of these guys. I think they had no choice but to sign him, and it was the right thing to do at the time because you want to hold on to the asset, but you do have to kind of figure out how it's going to go. I think the longer you wait on something like this, the worse it's going to be. And then you're talking about a Bradley Beal dump. So again, you want to talk about max value. If you're going to do this, or you're going to look to do in 2 years, you're doing it now. That's the good business. But if everybody's in this same economic, everyone's facing the same economic reality, there's just a lot of people who don't want Jalen at his contract. And that's also a consideration. You might get less for it because people don't want to be hamstrung by a deal that big for a player that they may or may not believe it truly deserving of it. So it's tough, man. It's really, really, really going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out as far as, as far as the future. But again, I say it dispassionately, just in terms of the way I would look at it. It's not the person, it's the return. I'm not married to keeping anything together if it's going to make the overall product worse. And I say all of this irrespective of this particular ownership group. A lot of these stories, Bobby, a lot of the stuff we're talking about here was an issue regardless of who was the owner going forward, including the current group. If they were to keep it, they too were going to face a lot of these things. I think a lot of people think that, the Wyc and those guys love the Celtics and they would have kept it together at all costs. No, they went all in to win a championship, and everybody is thankful for that. But they left this big ass bill, and anybody who believes this was an estate planning maneuver, I got news for you. It was not. They're running from this bill, and they're cashing in at max value before they have to be the guys who absolutely dismantle it. Make that somebody else's choice, or make somebody else have to foot this $500 bill if they want. We're going to get into more stuff in a second. I want to get this up. Quickly tell people about our sponsor here on the Garden Report, and that, of course, is Prize Picks, is everybody's number one daily fantasy sports app. Win up to 1,000 times your money. You pick more or less on at least 2 players. Doesn't matter the sport. You can cross sports. You've got college basketball going on right now, professional basketball, hockey, all sorts of great things. Baseball about to start up. There's always soccer action going on. Esports, doesn't matter what you want to do. You download it, play 5. Get 50 instantly when you use code CLNS. Once again, download the Prize Picks app. Play $5, get 50 instantly. Win or lose, immediately put into your account, code CLNS. And as we said, right now, great time with all of the college basketball and March Madness stuff going on. Great time to get involved here. Prize Picks, run your game. Bobby, let's get back to it. One of the other things that I thought was super interesting was the Steve Pagliuca stuff. Because this is going to be, if there's a story to tell, it's going to be this and the why behind the scenes in terms of, and if there's anything juicy outside of, these guys offered the most money and that's why they were picked. It's going to be Pags, and the Pag statement. I wouldn't say this is as close to throwing smoke, as billionaires get in terms of how they look at stuff. And let me throw it up here on the stage. Here's Steve Pagliuca's statement upon learning that he had not won the bid. Since the Grousbeck family announced it would sell the Celtics almost 9 months ago, I've worked tirelessly to put together a strong bid centered around the great majority of existing owners of the team. So I'm trying to keep the band together as best I can, who understand and appreciate what it means to be a steward of the Boston Celtics, a team steeped in championship tradition. Additionally, I recruited new partners with deep resources and expertise in technology and international markets to maximize the Celtics' success and ensure we can always compete for championships. Luxury taxes be damned, Bobby. Okay.
He knew exactly what to say.
Here. He knows exactly what to say. We made a fully guaranteed and financed offer. Also a dig at maybe the structure of the current sale at a record price. Record we don't know if he means an NBA record, because anything over 4 billion for the Suns is that, or if he's talking about record, which is the Washington Commanders, which sold for just a hair under the 6.1 that the Celtics went for at 6.05 billion this past offseason. So we don't know which record he's talking about. But again, it's, he's throwing out there a record price befitting the best sports fans in the world, and with all the capital coming from individuals who are fully committed to winning on and off the court. We had no debt or private equity money that would potentially hamstring our ability to compete in the future. We have felt it was the best offer for the Celtics. It's a bid of true fans deeply connected to Boston's community, and we've been saddened to find out that we've not been selected in the process. And again, like I said, Pags got left at the altar.
That is some really
here.
interesting stuff.
And it's a really interesting statement, the way that it's phrased, kind of like, this should have been us, guys, and I don't know why it isn't. And again, if there's going to be any interesting drama that comes out of that, it's going to be what was it about the Pags that's not
well
it?
that's why I think most people wanted to see Pags, is the thought that things can mostly remain the same here. You have the large majority of the ownership group that's, for the large part of their run here, focused on winning and making aggressive moves, and more recently paying the tax, that kind of stuff. So you're just comfortable with someone, someone that's been there. Even the stuff that we talked about, John, in terms of Pags being more of the basketball guy in that ownership group, the guy who brought in Danny Ainge and all these other things that you think about here. And obviously someone who has a lot of good connections and experience doing this and all the rest. You just know that he's a capable owner. So disappointing in that sense, I'd say, for most people here, again, especially that you're going to an unknown, a new owner, and someone that you just don't know when it comes to their priorities. So I think, again, most fans were looking at it probably and saying, all right, just give it a Pagliuca because he's been here. We know what he does. And everyone else is mostly going to stay in place at this point. I mean, thinking of Minnesota, John, and A-Rod and Laurie coming in there, and Ishbia and Phoenix, and some of these more dramatic ownership sales, obviously those ones far to pass. Even Dallas, what we saw with the Cuban stuff. How much drama, how much change, how much meddling there's been in those spots. Like, you think of the Rudy Gobert deal going through right after Minnesota changed hands, and Ishbia's first move in Phoenix being trading everything for Durant, and now Dallas moving on from Luka and maybe even wanting to move the team at this point. I mean, when you have a new owner and an unknown owner at that, you have no idea what their priorities could be, what they want to do, what they end up thinking about in terms of ideas down the line. Again, this doesn't seem like an owner who's going to come in and just try to change everything on the fly, but you just don't know. And with Pagliuca, you had an understanding, or at least a belief, that things are going to mostly stay the same here. And as he said there, focus on winning, focus on paying the tax, and just keeping the status quo. And I think, forget all the other stuff I just mentioned, John, that could possibly happen here. The tax alone is a real question, and just how much those guys want to pay that, the new guys, when the time comes.
So again, and that's where it comes down to here is, Pags, while he might be, blowing smoke here, because it's easy to say, but we would have spent the tax when you don't have to. You don't know if that's genuine, but he hit all the right notes in that thing, almost kind of telling people like, these guys, they'll let Wyc hang around, but they're gonna start slicing and dicing, and I wouldn't have done that. So again,
a lot of illusions.
Down.
Maybe they'll be hamstrung by the private equity and
all of it.
Maybe it's not fully guaranteed. There's definitely some really interesting potential
subtle
jabs
about
at the
any
new
of
group.
that. Yes, nothing subtle about any of it. It's very much, this is a jilted owner saying, you picked that guy. This is classic case of Tobias Harris over me. That's the equivalent of the Pag statement right here. Like, Tobias Harris over me? Are you kidding me? So yeah, he's salty. He's salty right now.
Yeah, and I think we will hear more here, given that he's so connected to a lot, I think, of the established reporters in the market, and I think he's kept a low profile so far through this thing. I think there are a lot of NDAs. Those might still carry over too, I'd imagine, into the future here after the sale. So maybe we won't hear anything about some of the shuffling and drama behind the scenes. Again, were he and Wyc on the same page, or were they battling parties in this thing? I want to know a little bit more about that too, as Wyc tries to stay on here. Steve didn't want Wyc as the face of this thing, and Bill was more amicable to that. And I still think that's significant, John, just because of how much Grousbeck has stressed that. Like, I'm going to be here 3 more years of me in charge. Like, that's so front and center to the sale that I have to imagine that had to be a consideration in the sale here. And again, I don't think Wyc wanted to sell. And Irv comes over the top, and they have to
There's no
sell. And
question Wick didn't want to sell, and
yeah,
he's hanging on. He's hanging on for dear life here. I mean, this was Wick's identity at this point. So yeah, there's no question he didn't want to
and
sell.
then we did see some reporting today too. Oh, maybe this offer could like elevate to 7 under certain circumstances.
7 point
here.
something million when the rest goes. Yeah, there's still going to be more.
So
Yeah.
does Pags come in at like 6.12, and they have the same offer in terms of guarantee, but there's this potential for, I don't really know how this stuff works from a business standpoint, but it is interesting to me that Pags is throwing his hands up, because conventionally you would just think whoever has the best offer wins this thing. But maybe there are certain incentives and structures and this and that that make Chisholm's offer a little better potentially. But
Yeah,
Steve's
and then
coming in
there's other
saying,
people
hey, our
involved
offer's
here.
guaranteed.
Robert Hale, Bruce Beal, and then 6th Street, a private equity firm, also buying a portion of the team. Will put in one more, about $1 billion worth there. This firm also bought into the Spurs in 2021, is now one of 3 firms with investments in multiple NBA franchises here. So that's, part of the money coming in here too. So there's more than just, like in many cases, this is a group. No one has $6 billion hanging around that they're just going to write a check. And so there's more coming in here for sure in terms of that. And we'll learn a little
And
bit
at
more
that
about
point,
some of
there's
these
more
new
parties,
owners.
there's more people with say in terms of the direction of the team. I think Chisholm has the final say on a lot of stuff here, but he has to cater to these people into the future too. And that's where the profit and the arena and all this other stuff is going to come into play here. So again, I think the best way to look at it, John, is that things will start changing as soon as this summer. And then beyond next year, all bets are off in terms of the salaries, the money, the situation here in terms of the payroll, because it's going to break at some point, even just from a basketball standpoint. Like, think about it. This year, you're giving up your ability to trade your 2032 pick.
Yeah.
Next year, I think, as the more of those years trigger, that pick moves to the end of the first round. So these penalties and the tax hits and the multipliers just start hitting more and more by the year.
I'm sorry, Wick is Kendall Roy, Darwin. Wick's the eldest boy. It's not Pags. Pags owned on his own a significantly larger portion of this team than Wick did when Dad a little, put some in his Christmas stocking. No, absolutely not. Pags had to sit around there while Wick took all the credit, knowing that he had owned a much larger stake of this team than Wick did. The rest was Irv. So no, that's the wrong analogy. Wick is Kendall Roy in this situation.
But give credit to him, give credit to Dad, whoever deserves the credit there, John. I know you hate that conversation, but it was a pretty good 20 years after
they did what they're supposed
1990s.
to do. Yeah, Bobby, look, 3 years ago, I was skeptical, particularly that time where they messed around with the TPE and they tried to get under a tax threshold to get that $13 million back. And I was like, these guys are just pinching pennies. And we also knew, just in terms of total, as far as their kind of clout, they were not in the upper echelon of NBA owners. This was not a big bucks Ballmer level rich ownership group. So you always knew that, like, I don't know that they're going to go deep into their pocket for any tax. And we thought if they did go over, it'd be a hair over, and they blew by it, but they blew by it almost mortgaging. I mean, they blew by it with the intent. I have to assume that it's going to be somebody else's problem. I don't care. We want to win one more before we go here. So this was one big final bash that they threw. I don't know that if their intent was to keep the team for another 20 years, if they would have gone all in the same way that they did here, or if they would have had to make maneuvers earlier. So you can give them credit for doing it, but I believe they always knew that they were going to bail, or Irving always knew he's going to bail after this. If we're going to spend all this money, that's great. We better win it. And if we do, or when we do, we're going to get out here and we're going to cash in. So yeah, it's great. They did fine. It's a salary cap sport, so it's always only so much that you can do in terms of digging into your pocket here. And they did, and they got a title. They got 2 titles. You have to be overall happy with it. I'm not giving them credit for the first title. I'm not giving owners credit for much other than opening up the pocketbook, which is what they did in the end. But again, easier to do if your intention was always to sell. For me, owners are just a blank check. That's all I want. I just want you to say when the guy in charge of running the team says, I want this, it's going to help us win, then you sign the check. That's all you do.
Yep. Yeah, and they oversee that Garnett thing and Ainge's run, and then even the transition, which was really rocky and weird and still doesn't make a ton of sense to this day. It ended up working with Brad becoming GM, and we'll see how long he ends up filling that position here too, because obviously I think he's someone who probably appreciates the flexibility that this group's given him. And if there's some demands or downsizing that's necessary there, is he going to want to be part of that himself? And he's mostly been quiet through this process, John, saying he hasn't heard anything and nothing's been told to him. Brad.
Bags? Oh, Brad. And so it was reported that Brad has met with all 4 of the finalists there, almost kind of like a pre-job interview, or just to kind of get a sense of them and to give his, I don't know, what you're gaining there. Obviously he knows Pags, but he met with everybody else here as well behind the scenes. So, I mean, the understanding is, Brad sticking around here. I just keep coming back to this Pags stuff. This really sets the new group up for failure in terms of perception. As I said, is you don't know, Bobby, if Pags would have absolutely blown past the luxury tax, but you have a guy going on record saying, I wouldn't have cared. So the first money move this next ownership group makes, everyone's going to be like, why didn't they sell the Pags? He wouldn't have done that. So it's a bit of sour grapes, and you don't know how honest it is, but him kind of laying the groundwork, like, we don't have debt. It was a hard cash offer. We're not strapped for cash. I don't give a crap about the luxury tax. Even if it was a little less, my bid ensures your team is better than this guy's bid. And that's what they took. And now you got to live with it. And every move they make is going to be there. So the dominoes that need to fall here, Bobby, that we really need to see is the structure of the deal, So like, if Wyc is at 5.5 or so with no debt, much better. Pags, much better for the franchise than 6.1 with high debt service and expecting returns to kind of to burn that off. So whatever it is, the sellers don't give a shit. They just want the final number. The owners coming in. So yeah, but the 5.5 billion with no debt gives them a lot more room to maneuver. The structure is everything. It doesn't matter if this owner is a big fan. If it's financed with debt and the bank comes calling, you got to find a way to pay the bank. And if that means you got to slash payroll or cut back, then you have to do it. There's no option here. So the hard cash thing is, I know people will be like, oh, poor Pags. But if that's true and there was no debt involved in that offer, I don't care what that number comes in. It's better for the franchise if Pags was the guy. We have to see how this deal is structured and how much debt is involved in it. As I said, the people who buy it, they don't care about the debt. They just want the money. For the fans and the state of the team going forward, less money and no debt is much, much, much better.
Yeah, and think of where they are right now, too. The status quo is about as good as it can get. You can only get worse than what they're doing right now in terms of shedding payroll and going in different directions and stuff. There's nothing that this new owner is going to do that you're going to say, wow, this is even better than Wyc and Company. It's only going to go down, you would think, there, unless they're able to maintain that status quo somehow and then, get a new arena and all the different stuff you could dream of here. But that just doesn't feel likely. And when you do start to talk about debt, John, I think that limits your ability to keep the payroll you want next year. Because I think, I don't know if Wyc mentioned it or it was being reported or thrown around at the time too, that they were losing money every year, running the Celtics at this payroll, at this salary, and, given some of the restrictions that they have here. So, this isn't a money-making team right now. They can try to turn it into one into the future. But right now they're in a difficult spot where the payroll is so massive, where you don't own the arena, where you don't have the revenue streams that some of these other great teams do here. And I don't want to say it, John, without knowing, because, I was looking around at the net worth and, what kind of money this guy has and what kind of pockets this group could have here. And I'm sure they have deeper pockets than, Wyc and company there, but this definitely isn't a Ballmer Bezos kind of situation either.
That's the
Like, they're
thing.
not just
It's
gonna
not
flip
super
this
rich.
bill.
And if it's not super rich and if it's financed with debt, they've got to pay the banks.
They're going
They
to
got to
start
pay people
slashing
back.
almost immediately. Yeah.
You have to slash. You got to make you
But you said it,
you got to
John.
make payment.
You said it, John. No one was going to pay the bill that's due for them. Nobody. Like, it's just
Nobody.
not something you do. Maybe you win the championship this year and you run it back almost in full, or you make a move that slashes things a little bit, or you just try to hold on for one more year through debt. But beyond next year, this thing's coming apart to some degree. And you got to be ready for that, because look at all the trades we've watched in this new era, John. They're very difficult moves in terms of offloading money, and they usually don't go great. So it's going to be fascinating. And the one thing, John, I know all the players and stuff got asked about the sale before the season, and, Joe and everybody and the people in that room. And it's, I'm sure we'll hear from them on this West Coast trip. I think it's hard for them to feel what this is tangibly, right? Because they're focused on playing, they're focused on game to game. Like, they're not thinking about what any of this stuff could mean. But I do hope there is a sense in that room, for whatever reason, that this is our run right here. Like, we have to get this year. This is our best chance to win. And beyond that, we don't know what's going to happen. And I hope that's something that to some degree drives this group a little bit into the playoffs, because this really could be the last hurrah for this group as they look right now to me. So who knows what's actually going to happen here, but I think we've had some sense going back to when they signed those contracts, John, that all the guys who signed those contracts aren't going to be here for the long haul.
Yeah. I've like, and again, as I said, I've said this, and I think it's irrespective of what ownership group came in, and even
now, if we were talking about Bezos today, John, I think we'd be saying, "Oh, geez, you can run this team to forever."
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's what I mean. Is like, if you've got that level of money, but yeah, based on the people that they were saying was involved here, again, Pag saying in his statement, luxury tax be damned, are words. I don't know if it necessarily means that. There's definitely a bit of sour grapes going on, so it's hard to say, but this was a reality for whomever. We'll keep talking for a little bit here. More people joining the live stream, and we do want to get your comments and kind of take the temperature of what people are feeling here as we're digesting this process. Again, real quick, watching another one of our terrific sponsors here at the Garden Report, and we are, of course, talking about Game Time Ticket Vendor. You can get seats to anything out there. You just have to log on to Game Time here, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. It doesn't matter if it's sports, concerts, whatever it is. Game Time is there for you with terrific deals. Prices actually go down the closer you get to the start of your show, or to tip off, or to game time, or whatever it is. The features are incredible. My favorite one is the panoramic views from your seat. This isn't, you go other places and you try to figure this stuff out. it's always confusing. Where exactly am I? What's it look like? The game time is spectacular. It's immaculate. You literally know exactly what it's going to look like, where you're going to be, and what type of ticket that you're purchasing. Also all-in pricing, so there's no hidden fees at the end that surprise you and say, that's not what I thought I was going in for. So again, best seats, lowest price guaranteed. Download that Game Time app today. Once again, code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply when you download the Game Time app today. Get back to it, Bobby. Where were you headed here?
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty going into the summer, and it's so hard to say what's actually going to happen, especially before we see what the result is this year for this team. But what I've heard going back for a while now is that they're going to take this thing year to year. They're going to see where they're at after each season with that payroll. And if you win a championship, it's far more likely that this team comes back in full. And if you fall short, there are some changes that happen. And, we'll see how it looks with them falling short too here. The picture we have of this team right now, John, as we talked about for the whole season, is that Tatum's ascending to an MVP caliber guy who can really carry this team, and he's obviously the franchise cornerstone for maybe his whole career. So he's obviously not going anywhere. Jalen feels pretty safe too, just knowing Brad and how he's handled this thing so far. I think the idea is building around those two and trying to figure out the rest. Porzingis expires after next season, so I think maybe he comes back at a bargain after that and wants to stay around, but I think it's more likely than not that he's out the door after that. So then you get to Drew, who
and Bobby, I'm throwing this up here. You watch the games as a super chat. Thank you for X3. Anyone who wants to send in a super chat, we're always grateful for these. The money is dispersed evenly among the hosts of the Garden Report. It doesn't go to those tyrannical owners of CLNS Media. So again, absolutely, we thank you for that, and we do appreciate it. You watch the games. It's Tatum and White, not Tatum and Brown. He's the contract to move. I know you keep saying with a level of certainty, Bobby, that it's going to be that Brad wants to keep this core together. One, I don't know if it's Brad's choice. And two, I don't necessarily disagree. I don't necessarily agree with that opinion there. Fans, what do you think? If you've got to build the core, are you going Tatum, Brown, and who cares what else? Figure it out on the reload? Or are you going to go Tatum, White, Porzingis and see if you can move someone like Brown? Because again, you're talking about double the salary of all these other guys. You got to cut two players to make up for what Brown's contract is going to be. And I don't think there's any of those two players that are less valuable as a tandem than Brown is individually.
Yeah, and when you start stacking up,
Holiday's the one that makes sense because of the age, for sure. But that's not that might not be enough. But yeah.
Right. And so Holiday's going to make 32 next year. That balloons to like 34, 37 by the end of that deal. That's going to be a tough deal to trade, I think, if they have to here. But he's still a guy who's so respected and is probably seen as a finishing piece on a team that's trying to contend, that I do think there would be some desire to add him to different teams around the league. And how would that actually play out with the money going out and coming in? I haven't really dove deep down that hole yet, because I don't think we have a good enough idea of where this team's going to go after this year yet and what they're going to do this summer. But I am looking at him because he's the guy who started to show the most decline already to this point this season. I think given Derek White's presence, he's a little more expendable than Kristaps Porzingis, just because of Al Horford's age. Like, you're not going to move on from Kristaps this summer and just say, all right, Horford, you got this for the next 2-3 years again. So I think that's a challenging part when it comes to the Porzingis dynamic too, because when it comes to movable contracts, John, Porzingis actually would be in the best spot because it's 1 year, it's expiring. Whatever team would take him on would be saving $30 million there, and having that come off the books after that season, maybe keeping Porzingis around at a lower price there. But I actually think, given Horford's age, that the Celtics are going to need Porzingis into the future a little bit there. So my eyes are on Holiday. What's the finish of the season look like for him? What's his value going to be going into this summer? The extension is just so massive. And we said it at the time, John, like, you really want to keep him around. You love what he gave you last year, but man, that's a lot of years and a lot of money for where he's at in his career right now.
It's not going to be. It's it really isn't. Like, I mean, it's it's a lot of money versus, not paying it, but it's not versus what you're paying for other types of players. I mean, again, it's $30 million, but you're still 30 plus, but like each year that goes on, these numbers seem smaller and smaller. And all of a
As
sudden
for
you're going to see
percentage of the cap, yeah.
percentage of the cap. All of a sudden you're going to see sixth men, type caliber players getting 25 to 30. And the holiday number is going to be like, yeah, I guess that's what stuff costs. So again,
He's 19% of the cap in that last year, even at 37, which isn't
yeah.
massive.
It's again, it sounds large, but that it keeps going up and keeps going up and keeps going up. But
it's
an
also
easy
relative,
one
John,
because
to what's he giving you?
it's also relative to value over replacement, and I think that's probably the thing that helps Brown the most, in that there's no wing depth on this team. If you had a up and coming wing player or someone who was a serviceable wing player who was 60% of what Brown was, and you can say, I'd rather surround with shooters and keep all of the rest of the pieces here, and I'll live with this. It's not going to be, this person doesn't have takeover game capabilities like Brown does. But if you had somebody there that you felt okay with, but the value over replacement is difficult because you don't have anything like that. You also don't have anybody who, and granted, I think this has been an inconsistent year defensively for Jalen, whether he's working through injuries recently or just simply a little bit of a championship hangover. You're not seeing, all 48, you're not seeing all 82, 48 level of defensive intensity here, nor do I think you should be, but he's been pretty selective about when he locks it in. But when he locks it in, he's still an elite one-on-one defender that can take on the challenge of guarding or neutralizing another team's top threat. And that's a hard thing to replace. When you get to the playoffs, if you got that version of Jalen, that's tough. You might find someone who can come close in regular season numbers and doing okay, but that's a challenge too. Also, sometimes when you're playing those physical athletic teams, they don't have anybody who can kind of return serve with them outside of Jalen. So he has value beyond his stats and beyond. It's what he can do for you. And you don't have anybody else that comes even close there. So there's huge value over replacement there. Huge value.
When you think about that value over replacement thing, obviously the biggest drop off is from Jalen to whoever's next. Yep. I think despite the numbers,
and then you go from Holiday to Pritchard, and you're like, we can live with Pritchard. Yeah.
I do think there's a world where Pritchard's the starting guard alongside White on this team next year. And whether that's because Holiday's here and he's taking a step back, or Holiday's going somewhere else, I do think this year you've started to see more often. And even in some games, John, and we're going to have a Drew video coming out here about some of the concerns I have about his productivity and just where he's been at this year. There have been games where Pritchard's closed over Holiday. And I think just from an on-off standpoint, the offense at the very least has been much better with Pritchard on the floor over Holiday this season, just because of the shooting. So that Holiday is the more reliable player. There's still the question, John, of like, how many years have we watched Horford say, it doesn't look like he's the same in the regular season, but then the playoffs come around and he's like, all right, it's go time. And all of a sudden you see the old Horford. That might happen with Holiday this postseason. I won't rule that out. But to this point, it hasn't been great with the injuries, the bumps and bruises, the shooting declines that we've seen from him. And that was part of the risk in taking him on at this stage of his career, is that, yes, you were going to get the immediate boost of this guy being amazing and helping drive that championship. This year, it's probably going to be comparable. But then next year, it's like, ooh, and then 2 years down the line, through the length of this deal, it's probably not looking great by the end of it. So this was always a tricky extension to sign. I think it's going to be a tricky deal to navigate going forward. I don't know what it would look like if you were even going to trade him. You certainly wouldn't be bringing anything significant back. You'd just be trying to get off that money, and that would be tough. And that would be the first move, like you mentioned, John, where everyone would be looking at this ownership group. Could you imagine if they win a championship and they trade Drew for nothing? Everyone would be like, what the hell? What was that? And then all of a sudden you start getting worried about the money at that point. So listen, no one cares. No one should care who the owner of this team is. But I do think there's real tangible basketball stuff you have to look at here and say, all right, what's the impact of this going to be? Because it's someone new with a new financial situation, with maybe new ideas for how he wants to go about things. And I don't care what Wyc says, this guy has the final say. Remember, John, Mark Cuban went out the door in Dallas and said, I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to be running things. But a year later, you barely started hearing from him. And then a year after that, they traded Luka freaking Doncic. So who knows what the hell is going to happen?
And didn't
here.
tell him.
Yep.
He didn't even know it happened until he saw the tweet. So no, he has no input whatsoever. And I can't imagine Wyc has a lot, again, unless it was negotiated and part of the deal and part of the reason these guys were picked. And maybe
That would be
that's
something.
maybe that's Irv's last gift to Wyc. I'm taking the team, but yes, we
You
can
get
pick an
3
owner
years.
that's gonna let you play in the sandbox, a little bit longer. So
But
again,
Again,
I don't
John,
know.
this new guy's writing the checks. Wyc can't be like, we're keeping this team together. Bill can be like, all right, are you paying?
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, Bobby, Irv was writing the checks too. It's pretty much the same scenario.
Right.
It's
Maybe
that
that would be
they
the
spe-
most optimistic way to look at
they
this.
spent as much money as Irv allowed, not as Wyc chose. It is
Yep.
what it is, and we learned that after the fact, which makes the whole thing so wild to me. I don't want to go
But
back
didn't
over
we
it.
imagine that scenario at the beginning of this year where Wyc brought the bill to Irv after all those extensions, and Irv was just like, what the hell? We got to sell.
But that's the first thing that made sense. Everybody who's swallowed, I don't like the writing. I don't like the stories out there that say they announced they were going to sell the team. They did so for financial and estate planning. I mean, they said they did so for financial and estate planning. I think the obvious thing was what makes sense when you step back and look at it is you can go all in, but this is your last year. Like this is it. This is what we're doing. And it worked. And the fans got their championship. Those guys got paid. Everyone gets what they want. What
You might get
happens
2
next?
championships.
You might get 2. You're right in the mix. Of course you are. You might get 2 championships out of this deal. Well worth it, and fans will be certainly happy, and nothing lasts forever, and you know that some change is coming down the road. You wish the Celtics were in slightly better position, having drafted and developed players that were waiting in the wings. It would make this a little bit more palatable if you are going to start selling key pieces of the team for cents on the dollar or whatever value you can get, or for groups of lesser players, and hope that the sum of the parts is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That's what you're probably looking at as a reality going forward. But again, nothing is going to be known until we get into this offseason and see what these guys are going to do. Things I'm really interested in is, again, how this deal is structured, how much of it is in debt, what it was about Pag's deal that they didn't necessarily like, what Wyc's involvement is actually going to be. I don't know that that's going to all come to light right away, but there are still, there are dominoes to fall here and things to learn. And there's also that piece of the minority piece also being sold a little bit later, and we'll see what happens in that regard. So this is what we know so far. And we wanted to jump on here and just talk about it. And we're processing a lot of this stuff in real time. All of us have the same information that you have. It's just a matter of how do you feel? Bit of a surprise. Again, I don't know that people thought it was coming necessarily today, but Celtics sold for $6.1 billion. At least that's the number we have for now. Group led by private equity executive Wyc and Chisholm, who is from the North Shore or South Shore? North Shore?
Georgetown, right up near me.
Okay. And a supposed lifelong Celtics fan, went to Dartmouth. So there's a lot of local ties there, and I know that makes people feel better. I will say, from reading the room and just following some of the interactions I've had with people on social media, I think people would have felt a little bit better if it wasn't deep pockets, that it would have been the devil you know instead of the devil you don't. And in Pagliuca, and it ended up not being. So you've lost that continuity. People like continuity. And you're bringing in someone new. Could be better, could be the same, could be worse, might make no difference at all. So we'll see how this stuff plays out. Bobby, closing thoughts before we say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised this is how it went. I did think Pagliuca was going to get it. I think there was a lot of indication out there that he was going to get it. So I know Mannix talked about that yesterday, and this name came out of nowhere to some degree. A couple of weeks ago, there was a report that it was this guy, some Phillies minority owner, and then, I mean, could you have imagined, John? There was another group out there where it was just
This is
like this
important.
nameless, faceless equity group that really I think would have been the most concerning out of all of those. So, yeah, you have a face here and a name and a local tie that makes you feel a little better about it. But again, until we hear from
Means
him,
nothing.
until we see him
Yeah.
in action, you have no idea.
Yeah, means nothing. None of it means anything until you see it. So we'll wait on that. Once again, quick shout out to our sponsors here at the Garden Report. You see it on the screen here. #1 daily fantasy sports app. Make real money right now. Pick more or less. At least 2 players. Download the Prize Picks app. New users use the code CLNS Play5, get 50 instantly in your account. Prize Picks run your game. And of course, Game Time. Download that Game Time app. You want tickets to anything, anywhere. Game Time's got you covered. Create an account, code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. This is Bobby Manning. I am John Zannis. We have another Celtics game tomorrow as they hit the West Coast, taking on the Utah Jazz Friday at 9:30, and then 6 o'clock
Midnight
on
post
Sunday.
game.
And we'll have a late post game, but we've never let you down, right? We have never let you down. And yeah, like the stream, like, subscribe, share it with your friends. More the merrier. We love seeing new faces in here. We love all of the OGs. Please come in here, like the stream, subscribe to CLNS Media, turn on your notifications so you know when a new video drops or when we go live. Thank you, Darwin. Thanks a lot to all of the OGs here who jump in basically every time we do something. We do appreciate the hell out of you guys. And yeah, we've never let you down, Bobby. It doesn't matter. Preseason, summer league, regular season, post game, power outages, West Coast. There's been a Garden Report every single time since we started doing it. And that is not going to stop. Thank you very much, pal. Thank you. Thank you to everybody again for jumping in here. This has been a special breaking news edition of the Garden Report. We will see you on Friday. No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're gonna do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to
Same.
feel that
Same.
way.
Yeah.
Let's fight out over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke